Census Bureau, the Bureau of Census, asking him who I was and stuff. He was like, I didn't answer any of their questions because I don't know anything, and I guess they did the same thing to his 10-year-old son one time. And they're like, here, answer all these questions and fill out this pamphlet. Silly of me. I think I should have responded to some sort of Census Bureau thing longer ago than I have. Hi. Oh, I'm live right now. Hi, guys, everybody. It's 10:15, 10:20, 10:18, and we are starting church. Hi, Wendy. How you doing? Missed you. I'm hugging you in my mind from this distance.
Hey, what, it's been like 6 months?
Yeah, it feels like, huh? Or if not, actually, I'm very happy you're here.
Like 7.
7? Thanks, David.
Or 8.
Keeping score. So this is it. Everybody's here. We could do prayer requests after. Excuse me for my cough. So if you guys would turn to the book of Psalms, just the one book of Psalms. There's only one. 40, I'll read all of 41. There's a couple verses in 40. And then there's a couple other verses in, I think, 82 maybe. Try to present this as logically as possible, because very commonly when you approach studying a subject, or when you approach studying to prepare a message, you have some sort of presupposition in your mind about what you want to talk about, and then the Lord leads you a different way, and that's what happened today, or this week. But ultimately, and I think all of my studies in the Bible are greatly affected by my experiences in the week and the people I encounter in the week. So there's a story probably that goes along with this one. But yeah, so starting in Psalm 41, we'll read the whole chapter, and then I'll read you my notes and just kind of some reflections that I had about it. So verse 1, Psalm 41 says, "How blessed is he who considers the helpless. The Lord will deliver him in a day of trouble. The Lord will protect him and keep him alive, and he shall be called blessed upon the earth. And do not give him over to the desire of his enemies. The Lord will sustain him upon his sickbed. In his illness, you restore him to health." So I thought that blew me away when I was reading and preparing this lesson, because I kind of thought that the next section of this psalm really speaks more to what I experienced this week. But the very first line there, "How blessed is he who considers the helpless," I thought was so powerful. The use of the word "considers" is powerful, as it asserts that even the mere thought or sympathetic emotion by one individual towards someone with in a lesser spiritual state or in need of help is worthy of the following blessings of God. What he lays out after that: the Lord will deliver him in a day of trouble. The person who considers that person who's helpless, the Lord will deliver him from trouble. He'll protect him and keep him alive. He'll be called blessed upon the earth, just for considering the needs, or thinking of someone who's helpless. And there's some notes in there about it was like the blurb in my Bible pointed to another psalm, which is actually pretty good. If you turn, as we're sitting here right now reflecting on that word helpless, go to Psalm 82. Yep. I had it a second ago and I turned it away. So my blurb in my Bible told me to go to Psalm 82 verses 3 and 4, which I thought considers the helpless verses 3 and 4 say, "Vindicate the weak and fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and destitute, rescue the weak and needy, and deliver them out of the hand of the wicked." And what was powerful in these two statements to me, just thinking about considering the helpless and vindicating the weak and the fatherless. Vindicate, I had to look it up. I think I knew it a little bit, but it's essentially like defending. There's defending if someone makes a policy, and yeah, you're advocating for it. Vindicating is speaking for, standing up for, defending. So we're defending or standing up for the weak and fatherless and doing justice to, or standing up for justice for the afflicted and destitute. Destitute is like just utterly helpless, I believe. And what I thought was so cool about that was during this whole week of lots of trials, I got to see my EMT instructor, who's one heck of a dude. I already gave away I was supposed to not give away any sort of who's involved in these stories. He was telling us a story, me and the other students, a story about some really, really, really hard times in his life, like life-altering, like that's the day that changes life type of stuff. And he talked about what made the difference for him during that time was stopping being so selfish. Sorry. And I was like, yeah, like, rock on, I'm with you there. And I think like that's our aim as Christian believers, is not being selfish. We're supposed to love other people before ourselves. Like Jesus' biggest commandment to his people is love God above everything else and love your neighbor more than thyself, or love your neighbor as thyself. And if you can give up your life for another, like no greater faith than giving up your life for your brothers. That's the type of stuff my teacher was talking about. And I thought, that's so cool, because this week has been a hard week. And I'm not like looking for pity or anything like that. I was just reflecting on like things are going to be difficult in life for me and for everybody. Life is a difficult game. And as I'm reading this from David, the next section of Psalm 41, so we can turn back to Psalm 41. The next section of Psalm 41 takes kind of a different aim than what the first section, the first three verses talked about. The next section, he says, "As for me, I said, O Lord," this is verse 4, "As for me, I said, O Lord, be gracious to me. Heal my soul, for I have sinned against you. My enemies speak evil against me. When will," and he's quoting his enemies, "when will he die, and when will his name perish? And when he comes to see me, he speaks falsehood. His heart gathers wickedness to itself. When he goes outside, he tells it. All who hate me whisper together against me. Against me they devise my hurt, saying, a wicked thing is poured out upon him, that when he lies down, he will not rise up again. Even my close friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me." Now there might be some backstory that I probably should have gone on into reading about what specifically he was talking about. Sorry, Gunner's being a ninja over there. Oh, sorry, bud. Do you have a headache? Is it blurry? Can you not see very well? Is it blurry? Okay, you're fine. So this next section turned the emphasis from considering and helping the helpless and how virtuous that is for one to do that, and it turned it a little bit in a different direction. He asks essentially he starts asking for forgiveness, or he asks for God's grace, which is God giving us something we don't really deserve, by merit of doing something to earn it. We didn't earn the beautiful grace of God. He gave it out of his own loving kindness to us. So David begins by asking God's grace and healing as he has sinned against him. And then he lists all the desires of his enemies toward him. It would suggest that David understands that God knows his heart, that maybe he wishes the same evil towards them, or possibly that he feels overwhelmed or possibly depressed and maybe feels like giving up. And this is just speculation on my part. I don't know why specifically David is asking for God's grace and for healing of his soul for his sinning against him. I don't know why specifically he is, but I'm speculating. Could be that he's in a dire situation. If you put yourself in David's shoes at this time, he's uncertain of his future and he's being pursued, but I'm guessing this is around the time when he was being pursued by Saul, and Saul was seeking to kill him, and he knew he was supposed to be king of Israel, but he was being pursued by Saul and his armies, and Saul's seeking to kill him simply for trying to do God's will. And he knows God's will for him in his life. He's been anointed to be the next king. And yet, when they find him, when they seek him out and are looking for him in that cave, he comes into that cave while they're all sleeping, and he doesn't turn his hand against the Lord's anointed. So David understood God's plan for him. But still, being pursued by the kingdom that you're planning on being king of so that they can kill you, that's got to put him in hard times. And I'm sure we've all been in hard times ourselves. Pretty dark and dismal state to be in. In fact, if you look back a couple of verses in chapter 40, Psalm 40, he says, in verse 11, it's just a couple of verses, you don't necessarily need to turn there. It says, "You, O Lord, will not withhold your compassion from me. Your loving kindness, your truth will continually preserve me. For evils beyond number have surrounded me. My iniquities have overtaken me so that I am not able to see. They are more numerous than the hairs on my head, and my heart has failed me." That sounds like somebody who's really taking into account the terrible time that they're living in, and it's greatly affected them. To be able to say, evils beyond number surround me, and my iniquities, that's the difference right here. My iniquities have overtaken me so that I'm not able to see. We get ourselves in the same position. At least I do. I get myself in the same position consistently. And what people in general fail to do is take David's stance here that he says, my iniquities have overtaken me so that I'm not able to see. The general human condition and response to difficulty in your life, and I'm not saying that that's the generality here. We have kind of a different model of a different way of being in being God's people, but the general reaction to adverse situations in our life is to say, that's the cause of my trouble. It's their fault, and that's what my boss is tyrannical, and he's why I don't have a good time at work. Or my friend got that promotion because she talked bad about me, and that's why I didn't get that promotion. People tend to point, and people in general want to assign blame to things for the reasons that they're experiencing what they're experiencing. What David's doing here is great. He says, my iniquities have overtaken me so much that I'm not able to see. And he's recognizing that he has a choice in all of this. The overarching reality of the situation of life is that we have a choice in how we view the world and in how the world happens to us, because we kind of have this somewhat subjective reality of what we see going on. Like kind of what I was talking about, what happened to me this week was pretty different. And there's something to be said for someone like David here who understood that life was going to throw him lemons and stones and the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune. But he knew that he had a responsibility. That's what he shows in verse 10 of Psalm 41. This is not as long of a lesson as I thought it was going to be. So we'll go to verse 10 of Psalm 41. He says, so he just got done asking forgiveness to God for, I'm just guessing, his mental state when talking about his enemies that are speaking evil against him and wishing his demise. He asked forgiveness to God, and he talked about how horrible life is for him right now. His evils beyond number are surrounding him, taking that from that other verse. But in verse 10 he says, but you, O Lord, be gracious to me and raise me up, that I may repay them. Not really sure what he means by that statement, but I'm going to have to study it a little bit more. By this I know that you are pleased with me, because my enemy does not shout in triumph over me. As for me, you uphold me in my integrity, and you set me in your presence forever. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Amen and amen. So David shows his righteousness and faith in God, despite all these dark times he's in, despite these enemies that he's surrounded by, and terrible iniquities that he himself may have inflicted upon his situation. In fact, because of them, God is giving credit. He gives him credit in verse 12 there. As for me, you uphold me in my integrity, and you set me in your presence forever. So what was powerful in that to me was we as Christian people and followers of God have a responsibility. And that is one thing that I think a lot of people are lacking the understanding of, is that they get up and life is really difficult for them, and sometimes you don't feel like getting up. I know we've all been there. Sometimes you feel like you don't want to get up, and it's just going to be another bad day. And what compels you to get up at that point? We might give up. Extrapolate that out 3 to 5 years and put yourself every day waking up with that worldview that life is so terrible. What's the point of giving up? Getting up. Just truly, people give up. That's when we see depression and suicide and all these things happen to people. And we have, however, and what people need, I think people need God, essentially. But God gives us responsibility. When you have a responsibility to something, to do something every day, that's what gets you up in those difficult times. That's what gets you out of bed, and you're like, okay, it's a hard day, hard week last week. All right, move on to the next hard day. I still have my responsibility to take care of, because when you have a responsibility, it gives you purpose. And anybody that is a parent knows what I'm talking about. You get up and you do what you do because you love your children, and you have a responsibility to provide everything that you can for them and to do your best at it. And like that situation I don't think that comes to the forefront of my mind enough when I'm having, a fight with somebody at work 3 times this week, or when I'm having an issue with another person. I don't think immediately in that moment of what the consequences of me doing that could be tomorrow, next week, or years out from the line. But if you look at how your actions can affect your child's life, your thing that you're responsible for. Like, if I choose to swing on this guy who's yelling in my face, and I throw the first punch or something like that, and he breaks his neck when he hits the ground or something, I don't have a job anymore. I can't provide for Gunnar anymore. How horrible that would be of a witness to him of what God should be doing in my life, and how horrible that would be for his life in general. So like those types of things occupy my mind. Well, after the fact, in the moment, it's a lot different, but it takes some serious mental maturity and calmness of mind to deal with somebody in that situation without dealing with them in wrath and anger. And I think a really good way to look at it, I think I said this once upon a time in a different study that I read, or maybe it was one of the messages that Pastor Joe gave us about not yet already, how God views us as we're not yet raised and resurrected, but he also views us as already being sharing in part of that resurrection through baptism. We're not resurrected from death into the new kingdom and living in the kingdom, but he also kind of sees us as we are. And I thought, what if we viewed other people that aren't yet gods? They haven't yet been baptized, but what if we viewed them as already somebody that, sorry, Holly, it's really hard, but what if we viewed them as already being gods and treated them the way we treat each other? We're pretty stinking forgiving toward each other. We should be that forgiving towards these people that maybe sometimes are yelling in our face, because that's the only way they know how to communicate. It's not an effective way of communicating, but at least it gets their point across and you know what they're thinking. Maybe not the healthiest way to communicate, but it is a way of communication. So,
Not only that, though, but like, sorry.
go ahead.
As a witness, we have to act like one of God's children, somebody who's unearthly. You know, it's hard to be graceful.
It's hard to be graceful.
Yeah.
It's hard to be alive. It's hard to go through the challenge of life. Life is a challenging thing. And guess what? We made it more challenging by choosing to do it the right way as God sees it the right way. Now you tell me, Wendy says. I think that this whole week has been a great exercise on that to me. And I told this story all backwards. Sometimes I start out my thinking or my study as, here's the story that happened to me this week, and here's what I read in the Bible about it, and here's how I reflected on that situation after being corrected in my thinking about it. Essentially, some people dealt with me in some different ways that I'm used to being dealt with, and I didn't see myself like necessarily causing any of it. I felt very like attacked. It's exactly what God tells us is going to happen to us. We're going to be persecuted and we're going to have enemies. You can't react towards them in violence and anger, because as James says, man's anger does not achieve the righteousness of God. That's, none of that is in the Bible. Get mad at him and get your vengeance. David?
Sometimes it, quite honestly, it takes a lot of strength to hold back how you feel and how you react to something that's going on in your life. But for me, I know that sometimes I usually reflect on what they're trying to say with all the voice tones and whatever else.
How old are you?
20.
I didn't learn that till like probably a year ago.
Right.
That's pretty astute.
But for me, I was born and raised in a church, so and voice tones are.
There's a lot.
You get a lot out of the person with just hearing the voice tone and what they're saying, body language.
So you're saying the intonation of the way that somebody says something really tells a lot about what they're actually feeling behind their communication?
Yeah, if, like, let's say they're yelling at you, they're probably angry at something that happened in their life, not necessarily what you're doing, but for me, I'm usually trying to reflect on and at least try and understand what they're saying, and maybe I'll repeat it at a calmer, more steady tone.
You sound like a psychologist, honestly, right now, man. Like that's how you deal with people that are very, very emotional and shouting things at you, is you calmly reflect back to them what they've said, because they hear that you heard what they're saying, and then they start to see that you're not their enemy necessarily, but that you're listening to them and you're showing empathy to them.
It says in the Bible, soft answer turns away wrath. So I've remembered that since my childhood, and since I've been talking to, my grandfather, he's usually hot-headed sometimes, and we just leave him alone. He blows up, and it's fine after that.
That's pretty good, man.
Yeah.
Emmy, thank you.
I guess going off of David, there was a time, like I watched a video, I think it was on Facebook, about a type of situation, and it's called the trash can effect,
Hmm.
of where people will throw their trash, how they're feeling during the day, onto you, and then you get angry because of that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do the trash can effect, you just take that trash and you let it kind of just go off of you, and they'll realize like, oh, okay, and they become calmer, and
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate estimations. People like sometimes just want to be negative a lot. They like find reasons to be negative sometimes, and that's where we can have a huge impact on other people's lives. It's like, that's very interesting. You feel that way. I would see that situation like this, and sometimes they're like, boom, light bulb. Wow. Why didn't I think of it that way? And you don't let it affect you, although it's very easy to let those types of things affect you because we're all humans and we are like, by our biology, herd creatures. And when the whole pack is telling you that there's things to be angry about, you should be angry, you feel sympathetic towards other people very commonly, and we have to kind of fight that natural urge to just go with the crowd because we're kind of like swimming upstream as believers. We're kind of trying to defy market trends in like, life is bad, you should be mad at this person, because they want to tell you how to think about other people. That's what people do, is they justify their own negative thoughts or emotions towards someone by getting other people to reflect back that that's the right way to think about it. And if we're good Christian believers, we don't automatically assume the negative stance on somebody's life. You might, like David said, that was really insightful, David. David said, if somebody's yelling at me, I try to listen to what they're saying and calmly reflect it back to them and think that maybe they actually have something else going on in their life that's affecting them to react to me in this way. Maybe it's not what I did. And that's awesome, dude, because that is truly... It is customer service 101, but human relations is what it should be, because when you work in customer service for long enough, you recognize that people just gonna get mad at you about stuff and they're gonna yell at you, and it's not I'm like a representative of an organization. I personally did nothing to this person, but yet I'm receiving all their anger, and you try to help them. You don't treat them as an enemy. You try to help them, and you recognize like, what in your life caused this situation? How can we move forward from here and we can make it better? Because like any bad situation can be, there's something good to be found in it, right? Wendy.
One of the things that I love about Psalms, and I'm so happy you opened it up, is David. I love how honest he was about his emotions in his writing, because you don't really see that in other areas of the Bible, and just how like he gave everything to God.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's like, I really messed up. I did this, or what? I'm doing what you said. So why is this happening? I'm terrified. So I love that. We were not exempted. He showed by doing God's order, he is not exempt from emotions, because emotion can be a beautiful way to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And I hate it. Like if something gets stuck in my head, I'm like, that's when I have to go, God, show me how to look at this, because I'm just spinning. It's not doing me any good. I feel like a car stuck in sand. It's not, how do I deal with this? And never once I ever been let down.
That's awesome.
But right, I'm very kingly, right? You think a king has a duty to uphold the image that he has everything together, and that he's the best leader that he possibly could be, and so do not show weakness. That's kind of the traditional archetype of
Like
the monarchy.
Yeah.
And so it is refreshing to read like him break down in words
And talk about integrity all in the middle of it at the same time. And integrity is a powerful word for me, you know, like to be, he was an amazing man. And yet
David.
he was really messed up at the same time, so it gives us all hope.
And that, exactly, yeah. We tend to we tend to view people as they are all one thing. They're either all righteous and all great in everything, and they do everything right, so they could we wouldn't afford them any sort of possibility of making a mistake, or we villainize them and we see people as a villain. And the truth of the matter is, every person has a great capacity for good and a great capacity for evil in them all at the same time. And we don't need to get into the habit of seeing every single action that someone makes as negative, or finding, or just, saying, well, they're that Catholic, that those Catholics are going to do that, or finding some way to identify some negative thing to them based on the group that they identify with or as. Because when all of this stuff boils down to things, it's up to an individual person to make their choices in their life, and those reflect their heart, right? Generally, what you do reflects what you care about. And you can't fault a person for making a mistake, because we are fraught with mistakes ourselves. And because one person makes a mistake at one point in time does not mean that they're going to forever make that same mistake. Generally speaking, people learn from their mistakes. There's definitely people that deny that there's any problems, or that they have any work to do on themselves, and that's why we have such an advantage in being God's people, because he's just like, dude, here's Jesus. You guys need to be getting towards him, getting towards being like him as much as possible every day. You need to be working on attaining that level of obedience to God. So we always have an upward trajectory that we should be aiming for. But other people are capable of making an upward trajectory as well. And we need to see that in other people more than we see the negative in them, because if we constantly reflect on the negative, then we'll get to that point David was at when he said, "For evils beyond number have surrounded me, and my iniquities have overtaken me so that I can't see." What do you do if you can't see? You can't move forward anymore. You're going to trip and fall. But the Lord sustains us, and he gives, like you said, he gives honor to God so consistently in there. And what I concluded with in reading these passages in Psalms, and really what really got me, was how selfish it is for me to see my issues in my life as so overwhelming that I would give up, when other people are having just as much difficulty, if not far, far worse. I've got it very easy as far as life is concerned on the planet Earth. We're like the wealthiest nation on Earth in history, I think. And we have, maybe not the wealthiest nation, there's actually wealthier nations. Sorry, Justin, I know you did a study on that. But we're very, very, very highly percentile taken care of in wealth, in healthcare, and the ability to feel safe in the environments we live in. Other people have it a whole lot worse. For me to feel like giving up in any sort of way would be a sin against God for sure, and I am worthy, or I'm in need of asking forgiveness from God for that type of attitude. And something that somebody I respect a whole lot, not that I've met them, but a guy named Jordan Peterson, he's a psychologist and a thinker. He said, he wrote a book called 12 Rules for Life, an answer to a chaotic world or something like that. It's called 12 Rules for Life. He has this rule, I think it might be the first rule in his book, is to stand up straight with your shoulders back, is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open. It means deciding to voluntarily transform the chaos of potential into the realities of habitable order. We can live our lives We can decide to live our lives, and we can make the choice to live our lives rightly and correctly by standing in direct opposition to all of the tyrannical difficulties that we deal with. And he says the chaos of potential. So many things could happen. We should be afraid right now if we go outside that we're going to get coronavirus. We should be afraid right now that when we drive in a car, we're going to get hit by a car or we're going to die, because that's a very high mortality rate. We should be afraid that we're going to die of chronic coronary artery disease. We should be afraid by all these potential things. But the answer for that is stand up straight, do God's will, have faith that he will sustain you through things. Like David exemplified, that God is gracious enough to raise us up out of that situation, out of that chaos, and he upholds us in his integrity, and he sets us in his presence forever. A great viewpoint to be in. That's all I have this morning. Does anybody have any more comments? I really appreciated you guys' comments. That was awesome. And also, David, I'm air fiving you in my head right now.
It's an awesome lesson today. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you guys like to do some prayer requests? Would you guys like to? We can stop recording for a prayer request, right, Nikki? Okay, we'll be back in 20 minutes for some worship. Thank you. Oh, wait, before we do that, we should close in prayer, and then we can do prayer requests. Janine, do you have a comment? Uh-oh.
It seems like get the UTI, it flares up, and then weeks later, she has another UTI.
Treatment for that's antibiotics, right? Generally.
Yeah, but, so she's allergic to about 3 to 5 different antibiotics.
That's a hard one.
So it's
So we'll pray for Sister Grace.
good for her body.
Pray for Sister Grace's body and healing.
And trying to go away and stay away.
David, would you like to close us in prayer?
Dear Lord, I thank you for today. Thank you that we can all be here today. I pray for Sister Grace as she's going through this battle right now. Please be with her and help her. Please be with us as we go about our day. And in your son's name, amen.
Amen.